Good morning, comic book fans. Welcome back to Comics in 5 Minutes. I'm your ever-loving Shorty, and 2 days in a row we're going to do a horror review. This one is Nightmare Country. Sandman Universe Nightmare Country, to give it its full title, and it's one of the things that James Tynion said it would be a reason why he would come back to DC Comics, was if they let him do a Sandman story. It's totally fine. Sandman Universe is a little bit tainted for me. They've done some good stuff and some bad stuff, and they also cancelled one of the best Hellblazer comic books in the past 20 years. But it's James Tynion. It's James Tynion, like Department of Truth James Tynion, Nice House on the Lake James Tynion. This guy is becoming synonymous with some of the best horror comic books you can read, and it's genuinely great to see him on something like this. But it does come with a couple of things which are going to be challenging, and I'd like to think that the people involved in it are good enough to deal with these things. So let's tell you about the two challenges I see first. Number one, this is kind of horror writing that I think has to be taken seriously. I've said in the past that sometimes I think horror you can get away with just gory imagery, or you can kind of just use artwork to do like interesting stuff in negative space. But sometimes horror comic books struggle to bring the scary. I don't think you're allowed to fail to do that when you're doing Nightmare Country, literally about a nightmare, the Corinthian to be specific, within the context of this. And secondly, whenever you're doing dreams or nightmares at all, I think it's very troubling to do it in a way which would work and make sense. I'm going to get around to all that in a second. Before I carry on, I've put a little content warning up on the YouTube version of this, but for anyone watching on TikTok or Instagram or anywhere else I'm going to put this video, be warned, I'm going to be discussing some very violent imagery in this. I'm even going to show you some of it. If that's not your cup of tea, absolutely fine, walk away. I'll give you a very quick rundown of it just before we get into the details of it. I really like to check it out. Okay, anyway, so first thing we're going to talk about is the artwork when you're doing just dreamscapes at all. Because dreams are really hard to put on paper or put in front of anyone and it makes sense, because whenever I know anyone who's described their dreams to me or to anyone else, they describe it in ways that would make sense within the waking world and the context of that, which means the things that made no sense to you, but because you are dreaming seem perfectly natural, have to come through a kind of filter, because your waking mind can't really understand how you would not think it was weird and how you weren't just completely weirded out by the entire thing when you're describing to people. There's a few shorthand things that a lot of artists do in this kind of thing where they mess around with line work. The word that comes to mind is non-Euclidean. I know it's not 100% accurate, but that kind of really odd, wavy line work where nothing really matches up where it's supposed to be. And you can also do it by basically putting the POV camera, as it were, in an unusual position and mess around with perspective. These kind of things are quite often used for drugs as well, or a drug experience, should I say, and they always come across as kind of the entry level, as it were. There's stuff which does it better, Undone by Blood. There isn't one. It's still my favorite versions of a drug experience comic book ever. Artist on this one, there's two artists here, Lisandro Esteron, sorry for mispronouncing that, and Yannick Paquette. We do have some kind of odd, angled, and unusual line work stuff going on there, and it works quite nicely. It's effective. It lets you know very quickly you are in a dream, but then it drops into being a bit normal, and it's just two people having a conversation. And yes, one of these people is a nightmare, but it doesn't feel like it's authentically in a dream. But then we change artwork. We go to the second person on that list, and we get the actual dreaming. And this one works quite nicely because it plays around with things that don't make sense at all. We have a giant baby with stalks on it, with zombies in the foreground, and right in the foreground, even more foreground than that, we have just Faye. We've got somebody putting up some wallpaper, which actually turns into a window. We have a description of a dream or a nightmare, and this is genuinely great because it ties into one of the few things that I'd say actually hits my kind of understanding of dreams. Is when I have nightmares, I have a weird self-defense mechanism. I will scream in my dreams if I'm absolutely terrified of something horrifying is happening. I don't scream out loud. What I do is I make guttural noises or whimpers, but I'm such a light sleeper it wakes me up. A description of this dream, I'm going to show you the artwork for it there, is a recollection of a nightmare had by an older man as a younger person, of looking in a mirror and seeing he doesn't have eyes, he has teeth. He didn't believe that, obviously, because he can see. So he checks with his fingers, and the eye teeth start eating his fingers, and he just lets it happen over and over, even though he wants to scream but can't, because the reflection he sees is just a smiling face. The idea of being absolutely terrified and not being able to scream, that is exactly my experience of nightmares being the absolute worst. The fact that maybe just by chance, this has absolutely clung to something which was genuinely unnerving for me was brilliant. And also, yeah, it's scary. I know I kind of was gonna I was gonna talk about more artwork stuff, but I realized what time I'm on for a 5-minute review. It is actually just scary. It is unpleasant, certainly, and it is disturbing. The artwork is fantastic, and it basically flips between the artists really quite effectively. But it is scary. It is unnerving. They introduced two fantastic new characters who do terrible, terrible things for their own reasons. It has a little Neil Gaiman-esque feel to it as well. If you've never read his Neverwhere, you absolutely should. Because two of the characters from that seem to have an almost Sandman universe analog in here, and they are written to perfection. Genuinely great. I was nervous going into reading this, but I'm glad I did, and I'm glad I put it on my pull list. If you're looking for something horror themed this week, this is the one to get. That's it for me today, though. I'll be back tomorrow. Until then, look after each other, everyone. Stay safe. Bye.